There's a massive event for Palantir stock that could lead to a multi-week run-up in the share price, and that event could get announced this Friday, June 7th. I want to talk about what this event is, how it might affect the share price in the short term, medium term, and long term, and what might happen if it doesn't get announced. We're going to get into all those details in this video, but first, if you're new here, I'm Austin. I'm a co-owner of cloudbusinessweek.com. I'm also a stock market investor, and most importantly for this video, I'm a Palantir shareholder. I've been a Palantir shareholder for multiple years. It's been a very nice gainer for me, and I can't wait to see what happens over the rest of 2024 and beyond. Real quick, if you're not subscribed already, become one of those 3,800 or so people. And if you find the video valuable, drop a like on the video. Helps the channel in a massive way. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's get into the video. The event I'm referring to that may get announced this Friday, June 7th is S&P 500 with Palantir. So this rebalance news for the S&P 500 comes out every 3 months, March, June, September, and December. And the first Friday of those months is the announcement of what's being added and what's being deleted from the S&P 500. And then 2 weeks later, the third Friday of each one of those months, the rebalance actually happens. So if Palantir does get included into the S&P 500, that'll be announced this Friday, the first Friday of June. And then the stock would actually be added to the index the third Friday of June, which is the 21st of June. So that's that 2 week window that we would see a very nice run up in the share price historically. Typically, we see the index inclusion announcement and then a massive run up for about 2 weeks. And then once the stock is added to the S&P 500, the hype dies down a little bit. A lot of traders take their profit and the stock consolidates down a little bit. So just in case you're curious, Palantir does meet every single criteria that a company needs to meet in order to be eligible for S&P 500 inclusion. Let's just go through them real quick. It's got to be a US company deriving 50% or more of its revenue from the United States. Palantir gets a check on that. They must have a market cap of more than 8.2 billion. Palantir is way above that at like a 48 billion. Public float, at least 50% of the company's shares must be available for trading on the exchange. Yes, Palantir's floats at like 88% or something like that. Earnings. The company must have positive earnings in the most recent quarter and over the last 4 quarters combined. Yes, they had positive earnings in their last quarter, and yes, they've had positive earnings over the last 4 quarters. The trading volume has to be over 250,000 shares per day on average. Yes, Palantir is way above that. And then the stock must be highly liquid. Palantir is highly liquid. It matches all the criteria that the S&P 500 committee looks at in order for a stock to be eligible for S&P 500 inclusion. And although the next 2 things are not necessarily required for eligibility, they seem to matter as I look at past S&P 500 inclusions and deletions. The company is not in decline in any way. Palantir is in a very, very good spot as it relates to revenue, as it relates to net income, as it relates to operating income, etc., free cash flow. They're growing massively. They're about a 20% revenue growth company, and it's expected to accelerate a little bit over the coming years. We had the hardware boom with AI. The next thing after the hardware boom is the software boom with AI. And Palantir is positioned very nicely to be a massive beneficiary of the software boom with AI that we're going to see over the course of 2025, 2026, and beyond. So they're an extremely relevant company, and their business is certainly not in decline. Their business is in a very good spot, and also not a requirement, but it seems like the S&P 500 committee likes to wait until a company has proven themselves on the operating income numbers, not just the net income numbers. Some companies are net income positive just because of interest income being positive. That's not the case with Palantir anymore. Palantir has been operating income positive, and those operating income numbers have been growing like crazy for more than a year now. So there's no reason why Palantir couldn't get added to the index this Friday. The only thing you can really say is that it's a little bit of a controversial stock. Some people really hate the stock. Some people really love the stock. It's super controversial. And since the S&P committee is just a bunch of people, maybe those people don't like Palantir. Maybe they're on the side of they don't like the company at all, rather than the side like we are are like, we like the company a lot, we like the way the business is going, we like the fundamentals, etc. Maybe the S&P committee is on the other side of that. That's really the only reason you can say that Palantir wouldn't get added to the index over the next few quarters. If it doesn't happen this Friday, it might happen in Q3, it might happen in Q4 of 2024. To me, it's just a matter of time. The sooner the better, because index inclusion can really help shift sentiment around a stock. And sentiment is what determines where the stock price goes in the short term and in the medium term. Over the long term, it's determined by company fundamentals. If Palantir gets the index inclusion, the sentiment is going to change for the positive. They're going to be seen as a little bit more legit. Some of the people that are bearish on the stock will become a little bit more neutral. And some of the people that are neutral will become a lot more bullish on the stock. So overall, it's going to be positive for the sentiment, which can be positive for the share price, of course, in the short term, because there's a lot of excitement about the inclusion, and then in the medium term, because the inclusion happens and now the company has become a little bit more legitimized. Another thing this will do for the stock is it'll increase institutional ownership. Institutional ownership with Palantir is pretty low at about a 41%. Compare that to someone like Salesforce, who's well into the 80% on the institutional ownership numbers. It's not like historically low or anything. Tesla has a very low institutional ownership, somewhere around 43%, and they are in the S&P 500 already. So that's another stock that had a really low institutional ownership number whenever they got added to the S&P 500, and it's really still stayed pretty low, around a 43%. So Palantir is not crazy low, but getting the institutional ownership number up a little bit could be good for the stock price over the medium term and short term. If this index inclusion news does not get announced on Friday, I don't think it's going to hurt the stock at all. If they get snubbed, I don't think it's going to hurt the share price whatsoever at all this Friday, which is a great position to be in. If this gets announced, massive pop most likely. If it doesn't get announced, nothing negative is going to happen to the share price. That's a great position to be in with Palantir. So what does this mean over the long term for Palantir? Does this change Palantir's fundamentals? No, not at all. It definitely doesn't change the company fundamentals itself. It does change sentiment around the stock. It does help legitimize the stock in many investors' eyes, but it doesn't actually change the revenue. It doesn't actually change the net income growth. It doesn't change the operating income growth. It doesn't change the free cash flow growth. It doesn't change the products that Palantir is going to put out into the marketplace that are game-changing, best of breed products. Those are the reasons that I bought Palantir. Those are the reasons I continue to hold Palantir. I don't buy Palantir because of a potential S&P 500 inclusion. I'm definitely not trading around S&P 500 inclusion. Overall positive thing for Palantir to get included. What it can do is it can provide a little bit of a floor underneath Palantir stock, and it can create some stability to where the stock price isn't quite as volatile, slightly lower beta. A lot of people like higher beta stocks. But all in all, Palantir getting included into the S&P 500 is a net benefit over the short term, medium term, and long term. The shorter term, the higher the benefit. The longer term, the lower the benefit, because over the long term, companies follow earnings. Stock price follows earnings. So if Palantir's earnings keep going up, the stock price is going to keep going up. And it seems like that's going to happen for this foreseeable future with Palantir. And their net income and their operating income growth is going to be so much higher than their revenue growth. That's what we like to see. A great company, a great management team can grow their bottom line 2x or 3x or more than that above their revenue. So what I'm doing with Palantir stock is I am holding 100% of my shares. I haven't bought for a little while, but I have a very large position. It's a top 3 holding for me, and I plan to hold 100% of my shares before index inclusion. After index inclusion, I'm going to hold these shares for many, many years to go in the future. And for me, I'm just riding this roller coaster ride for a very long time. It's been exciting to be a shareholder so far, and I can't wait for the next 5 to 10 years to see what this company can turn into over time. Let me know if you think the index inclusion is coming this Friday, or do you think it'll be in Q3 or maybe even Q4 or later than that? I want to hear your prediction on when Palantir is going to get that index inclusion, and what are you doing with Palantir stock out there? Are you buying? Are you selling? Are you holding? Are you doing options plays? Let me know in the comments below. Definitely one of my favorite parts of posting here on YouTube is checking out your comments and responding to you down there. Thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing day.